The air was stale inside that house. The windows were locked, and they'd been nailed shut for years. Drapes smothered most of the scant light that might have made it through the windows. In the corner of the room was one of the town's recluses under her frayed afghan. She hadn't picked up her paper for over a week, and the neighbors were worried. She lived her life in that house, if you want to call that living, locked behind doors and locks upon locks. The trouble with locks is that you never just lock real or imagined enemies outside. And if you're really good at that, if you lock the whole world out, of course you're locking God out too. The problem is you never just lock the other out. You lock you in. There are lots of locks today, more than I can ever remember there being. First, there's physical locks. I'm 74, and I'm old enough to remember a time when nobody locked their cars when they parked them. And you never locked your house either unless you were away on a vacation. The physical locks and all the interest in having locks and security probably is a symptom of spiritual locks also that are up on all sides. Locks. People have locks. They used to just disagree, but now if someone disagrees on you on any number of things, you're locked against them. They're locked out and you're locked in. People in Washington, it's called deadlock. They won't even hear it if it comes from someone they don't like. People have locks against people who look different or think different or have lived in a different way. In heaven, there are no locks. Heaven is about mobility and accessibility. In heaven, you go as close as you want to God whenever you want. There's no lock. You go as close as you want whenever you want to the Virgin Mary, or your patron saint, or your grandma, or your great-grandma, or your aunt, or your uncle, or your kids. In heaven, there are no minds locked from thoughts that are bigger than what you have, and there are no hearts locked from enemies. Jesus came down from heaven to loosen locks that had the world on lockdown. Today he goes through locked doors to give his poor disciples, just like that old lady in her stale house, to give his poor disciples fresh air and light. They love it. They see the Lord and they breathe the air and they rejoice. And he comes back a week later. Guess what? To lock doors. And he does the same thing. He comes in and again they're happy. And finally, at the end of 50 days on Pentecost, his Spirit will blow into a locked room like a tornado, all fiery, with tongues of fire, and more or less say, will you unlock the blankety-blank door and get outside and breathe some air and get some sun and proclaim the good news to other people and stop treating the whole world like it's your enemy. The gate of heaven is unlocked. The door of the netherworld is unlocked. The souls are coming up and going into heaven. Let your minds be unlocked and your hearts unlocked. Why do people get locked in? It's understandable if an enemy comes and locks you in, but why in the world would a person ever lock herself inside herself? Why would a guy lock himself inside? The Bible suggests reasons, and if you think about it, they're all true, and probably they're true of everybody at some time or other. One reason people get locked is we're not brave enough to live the truth. Truth makes people free, and if you hide from the truth because it's painful and you don't want anybody to know, and you don't even want to think about it, then you live life as if you're locked up. You may remember the Second Vatican Council. It was a long time ago, but they went through they're the ones that changed the Mass from Latin to English, and they tried to simplify the sacraments, make them more available, make them more like they were in the old days. But one thing they did, it was a change, and it turned out to be a turkey. They decided that probably it would be good to have frequent communal absolution. So that people would have the grace of confession. The idea was people would get together, everyone would make an act of contrition together, I confess, blah, blah, and then the priest would proclaim God's mercy and give everybody general absolution, and everyone could go home. And it sounded like such a good idea. And believe me, when priests are tired and they see a long line, I wish I'd just do that. But what the spiritual directors in the church said was, part of the healing power of confession is you fess up, you say things out loud, you live your truth and own your truth and speak the truth, and as soon as that happens, something comes unlocked. For instance, it's Easter time. A lot of people come to confession, and always there's some people that come and say, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. When was your last confession?" I don't remember. Well, sometimes that's true, but most of the time that's a little fib. They do remember, they don't want to say it. Well, think hard. When was your last confession? 13 years. Okay. What are your sins? All the commandments. Well, do you see that that's a little bit of pussyfooting? You kind of wait and you prod a little bit so that stuff comes out. And it's unpleasant. I don't like to go to confession, except I do. When it's over, I'm so happy I went. But in the meantime, if you have to sit there with another human being and you say stuff like, "I'm a serial gambler and I lost a lot of money and we almost lost the house and I'm keeping the whole thing from my wife. I have gotten used to pornography for release, and so I just don't want to be patient with my wife or my husband anymore. I'm unavailable emotionally to my children, and all I do is crab at them when I see something that's not perfect. I'm a stingy so-and-so, and I've never given really much of anything to anybody. I am spiritually lazy and don't have my life in priority. I've had an abortion. Saying those things, it's mortifying. And I speak as one who knows. As soon as it happens, how does the person feel? A priest can almost hear the chains drop on the other side. They're so happy, they just said it. It's not unlike going to an AA meeting, and part of the freedom of living in and getting unlocked a little bit and just dealing with it and suffering over it and getting over it or not getting over it is, you say, "Hello, I'm Michael. I'm an alcoholic." There's something that unlocks you when you're brave enough to live in the truth. Well, anyway, enough about that. What's another reason? Fear. That lady in the house, I bet she had been traumatized as a girl and never quite got over it. And her scars, instead of going out and getting those scars looked at and have some sun and some fresh air on those scars, that lady just held her scars like that because she didn't want any more of them. Well, very understandable, but not right. It keeps you locked. Now, it's safe to say that the person most traumatized by what happened on Good Friday was Jesus. And he was traumatized. He was a human being. Physically, he was massively traumatized. He died of the traumas. But was he psychologically traumatized? How could he not be? Everybody that everyone he'd been taught to respect, the priests, the religion, everybody, and the apostles, they all, just about all, fled when they weren't downright telling him he was an ass, right to his face and spitting on him. What would that do to a person's self-esteem? He was massively traumatized, physically, psychologically, emotionally. What does he do when he rises and comes back? Does he come back and he's just learned to wear shirts that have extra long sleeves, and he's covered this up or put a pillow inside if there's a vacant area? He comes and says, look, I've dealt with these things, and I'm over it, and I forgive, and I want you to get over it and forgive yourself too. It's amazing what he does with his wounds. And it's a sign of what we're supposed to do with our wounds instead of being a little old lady in a stale, smelly house. Well, a final reason a person might be locked is just plain old greed. We live with greed so much we have no idea how greedy we are. I'll speak like an old fogey, which I am. Remembering back in the days when there weren't locks, and if you had extra stuff, you put it in the closet way in the back, or you stuck it in the attic, or you put it in the basement. Nobody ever heard in the old days, unless you were a millionaire, about building a shed in your backyard so you can keep safe all the stuff you never use, or renting a rental space so you can hold on to all the stuff you ever use. I'm not throwing rocks at you. You know that I'm leaving in end of June, and I'm already going through stuff because I have to shed about half of the stuff. I hold stuff in my hands that I've forgotten I had. I haven't looked at it or enjoyed it in 3 years, but it's got a memory associated with it, and I'm holding it. When I think of giving that away, it hurts me. I don't want to give it away. That's called greed. And one day I won't even remember what that's for if I live to be old enough. But one day everything's going to be given over. I'll rely on God to give me back the memories that I should have and take away the memories I shouldn't be holding on to. The church has a remedy for that so that we don't just get completely wacko over it, and it's called tithing, and it's called almsgiving. And I'm going to make myself do it. I'm just going to make myself do it, and I won't like it, but I'll feel better afterwards. I know I'll be unlocked. Well, just as a sort of a PS, here's an odd thing. Sometimes a person's most valuable possessions, this is so perverted and so human, are the hurts that people have done to us. It's been explained by psychologists, if you were hurt, sexually abused by a priest, or beat up by a dad that was mean, or abandoned by a mother that shouldn't have abandoned you, or humiliated by a teacher in school, or whatever, a person, if you're not healthy, holds on to those things like it was an emerald or an amethyst. You hold on to that thing and think, I'm so good. I'm so good, and how could they have been so bad? I'm such a martyr. No one says those ugly things don't happen, and they need to be brought out into light, and people need to make amends and to pay consequences. I don't think those things ought to be swept under any rug. But for a person that's been wounded to hold on to that and not let it go, move on, let it be, it's more of this. And Christians aren't supposed to live with this. We all know what Jesus wants us to do with the locks.